All right, so here we are at the beginning of 1811. 1810 was an exciting year, to be honest. Um, Trying to think what happened. Basically, the French went to war with Prussia and plowed into them. They have things they need from Prussia for either their automatic victory or, just whatever. Um, so, among other things, they want to conquer Poland, which from Prussia they can take Posen, Masovia, and now East Galicia as well. But they didn't manage to successfully conquer Prussia. At the same time, Russia is at war with them, so is Britain. The Russians, however, were being attacked by the Turks. Now, the Turks could have automatically won the game on the last year. And so the Russians had to basically rush their troops. Something to do. Some of the issues with the Chits allowed Russia to get a jump that gave them the capability to beat the Turks back. But that means they weren't available to help defend Prussia. And now they're going to be standing more or less alone against France, which I think is going to be a real problem. France, meanwhile, in the winter captured not Mecklenburg, but they captured Saxony, Hanover, and they tried for Neufchâtel. They tried for other things, such as Mecklenburg, which they couldn't actually take. It had been absorbed. Hanover had been absorbed too, but they freed it. Hesse and whatever. Those they're probably not going to get, which is kind of painful. So Mecklenburg is required for France to win the game? No. They took Holland as well. Holland, Hanover, and Neufchâtel are all requirements, though, for France's automatic victory. They have to hold all of those. We've got Wellington up here in Denmark, kind of facing off. He's got a double army facing off Davout with a double army. We've got Napoleon currently sieging. Wow, now I'm failing completely. Königsberg. I wanted to call it Kriegspiel. Yeah, hey, it's a German word. Screw it. The Turks have stayed at war with Russia in the hopes of being able to maybe stab into another victory type situation while France is pressing them. Spain is the only neutral in the game. Britain is rethinking their priorities and is considering that maybe they need to take the Ottoman Empire away from the Turks. They managed to establish it essentially. The rules are a little vague about that. In other notes, my new camera is here. It looks very much like this one, but it's got all this information, which the one I'm holding right now also has. It's going to be a little confusing, but it's nice. Now I have a working camera right now in my hand, right? The one I've been using for the past couple of years is dying, but now I have a replacement and a backup, just like with my glasses. It's something I need. Just like with food, I'm going fucking crazy because my food stocks are dropping so fast. Or, well, not so fast, but over time they've depleted quite a bit. The other one I think isn't going to come. I'm going to see if I can cancel the payment on it, but we'll see. It's fucked up because I used a credit card, but it went through PayPal, but not my PayPal account. I think I'm going to be able to cancel it, but again, the reason I'm canceling it is I think the company doesn't exist, and the only reason they're processing payments and able to do it is because they've got PayPal still hooked up, wiring shit to them. But if nobody's taking the money or whatever, I don't even know. I don't know what's going on with it, but it looked pretty suspect. I should not have ordered it to begin with, but it was a good deal. It was less than this one. I thought this was the one that came with an extra charger. I may be mistaken. Maybe that other one does, which would be helpful because my charger is kind of a piece of shit. So if there's something else that works with these. Oh, and I didn't get a memory card or anything, but it came with a battery, which no transformer. Kind of weird, but absolutely, the new one is absolutely like, looks like it's brand new. It's still stiff and everything. This one kind of does too. So I don't know what's going on and why maybe that one was giving me some problems and I don't know. I thought that I had this one before. Anyway, such is, we'll get moving on 1811. Britain is still at war with the USA, but they ended their war in India, so they've got some additional troops coming in. And I'm beginning to have a little bit more enjoyment, respect for, not for the historicity of this game, but for the way that the victory point mechanisms, that the automatic victory mechanisms make this kind of an exciting game in a way that I don't really feel like any of the other big Napoleonic War games do. You know, obviously, the Napoleonic Wars has sort of an automatic victory situation baked into it, but things like Empires in Arms, War and Peace, they might have automatic victory. Well, Empires in Arms does not, or it does, but it comes from collecting enough points. War and Peace does, but I think it's only like by lasting out the whole game. So like this one has this capability where you're being thrown into positions where you have to have your diplomacy factor in the automatic victory conditions. The problem with it is I feel like those are creating ahistorical circumstances that don't really thrill me too much. The event deck contains 9 cards. None were added this year. It was just a reshuffling of the discards. There's going to be 3, 4, 5, plus 5 is 10 cards that are due to be dealt. Following the rules, Britain loses a card. I would think France would lose it because they're getting 3. What's really funny is if there were 8 cards, Britain would lose 2 cards, which really kind of disturbs me. But that is how it's worded out. And then France would start losing cards, which again really bugs me. It feels like France and Britain should have more control. Of course, they have bigger decks of cards, and France especially has hands. France has an especially large hand, so they can throw cards out to make sure that they get some back. That might be to their advantage in some cases. The discussion I had, I think in the last video, there's this Holland annexed card. If Holland is allied to France, it is no longer considered a minor power and becomes a province of the French Grand Empire. It has to! I just don't know what to do. Anyway, I'm pulling cards that I'm likely to want to play right away. Here comes the third Rome. That's going to force Russia to devote some troops to fighting Turkey in the east. I'll keep working through these. Interesting thing is the ordering of the public events. Now, the way I've been doing this is blocks have to worry about their events as a group. And whoever comes first in the block, that whole block gets to operate in it. That's not spelled out in the rules that way. Just coming through things. Spain is the first block. They're going to play nationalism. They have to play it. It's a public event. One mandatory alliance can be broken freely according to the rule. Nobody's got a mandatory alliance. Okay? Great. Without effect. Turkey is next. They don't have one. Then Prussia. Prussia is part of the coalition bloc. Now, they're going to play a Rothschild. That's going to give them more money, build their forces, great, whatever. But let's look at the rest of their coalition, which is Russia and Britain. Britain has the Third Rome, which they'd like not to play. Russia has inflation, which they can play. So I am going to bury the Third Rome, and this is important because it's going to actually not get played all year for various reasons otherwise. Inflation, I'm going to hit the French with it, try to hurt their money. And that is a public event. That is the public event that the coalition plays. They're only allowed to play one, so they don't get to play the foreign war. Then we go to Austria. Austria has a foreign war, Bolivar. It was blocked last time. Spain has to send a fleet and 2 infantry steps to the foreign war box. Okay, that's cool. So that's going to have to get played. We'll put that here. We'll put the inflation on the French, just to remind us what's going on. And the Rothschild is not. So these other ones, the French ones and the Prussian one, those are going to be played, but they'll be played during the economic phase. They're not public events that have to be played. But the inflation is, and that's going to cut a 10-pound amount off of the French. Okay. And that will get us to the economics. As usual, I don't really have the energy to deal with the economics, so I'll come up slowly and cope with it. Other than Masovia, this is the first time that we've had a major power province in someone else's hands. And I've been doing that wrong. I think even in the 1792 scenario that I played, I've been doing that wrong. I read this, which is during a war, a province controlled by the enemy causes a 2-pound loss to the former owner, 4 pound if it's key province. Well, if it's transferred, it's 3 and 6, which actually means the Prussians have an extra buck. Doesn't really matter, but that's for East Galicia. And the Austrians are going to lose 1, 2, 3 for that. That's the only province that changed hands this time. Masovia is special anyway, because it comes off of here with manpower attached to it. So it counts as part of a minor. So it really, I handled it with its values instead. So I haven't cheated yet, except maybe the Prussians had an extra buck if they could have figured out something to do with it. I don't think they could have. And no matter what, it won't make much difference. But in both cases, I was right about, now wait, East Galicia is not one of the 3 that's listed here. No, regular Galicia is. Regular Galicia, whatever that is, which is actually the West Galicia up there that Austria does still own and somehow is getting the money and manpower from. They're not at war with Prussia, but it's kind of a fucked up situation. But it is strange. You could lose like much of your country and still have your full manpower capabilities. In that kind of goofy situation where the force pool just disappears so quickly. I mean, Austria, I expect the countries to be able to rebuild their forces within 2 years, I guess. And that's sort of what happens, but maybe because it was August, it feels like it's a long way off. I'm thinking in Empires and Arms type terms where there's quarterly, instead of quarterly turns, there's quarterly economic turns. with monthly actual turns. So it feels really odd that, like, yeah, I've got everything built. I built a couple of detachments. I've got 36 bucks left after having built a navy. Damn. Yeah. Now, I got to see if I have any extra stuff like depots or anything I can build. Fucked up again, and now I'm out of egg. Had one for breakfast. Threw the destroyed one out. And it's not a good situation. I ended up sleeping 11 or 12 hours. I don't know if I would have made it out if I'd gotten up a little bit earlier than that. We're talking about I got up, I sabotaged myself. So I was up past dawn yesterday. And I don't know. I mean, if I think I'm at the point where if I don't go shopping tomorrow, real shopping, like if I don't like take a nap and go in the morning or something like that, I'm gonna have to head down to the local nearby market of No Choice, which isn't a bad walk, and just go with a little backpack and grab myself, a couple of things, some eggs, some tortillas, some spinach, stuff like that, to keep getting me through. But this is horrible. Yesterday I was perfectly capable of going. Multiple times I chose not to. Today it's way hot, and it just was. Also, my leg is hurting worse, which is a real problem. All right. Anyway, we're on the economics. I'm up to the French at this point. These cases, like Holland, Piedmont is listed as French and GE. We look up Piedmont. It starts out and continues through the entire game as a French ally, not as French territory. The game just doesn't, like, this is required to be incorporated into the Grand Empire. I don't know. I don't know what to say about it. I just don't know. Like, in any reading, it can't continue this way. And I'm trying to find some kind of, the only sort of work through I have is, look, if France wants to win, they have to absorb it. That's one part of it. And second, although I'm not absolutely certain about that, actually, may just have to control it. No, annexed into national territories, all of the GE or 1805 GE, which includes Piedmont. So I'd have to absorb it. And second, if it's ever captured and I retake it, then I would have to absorb it. But that, because again, it's considered a minor country in this. I don't think it really is. I thought it was actually incorporated into the Kingdom of Italy, but I don't know. I could try to look that up, but it's not worth it, Anyway, again, I'm looking at, hey, I had to destroy Hanover and Holland and turn them into part of the Grand Empire because of I don't even remember where it was. Is it in the conquest rules? If the minor country is located within the Grand Empire area, it must be integrated into France's national territory, whether this minor has troops or not. But that happens during conquest. So there is a way to see around it. Strangely enough, I'm not sure that I can convert Piedmont into not being a minor. in order to automatically win the game, I think I have to lose it to do that. This is just pissing me off so much. Like, the game just, they didn't fit it together right, you know? What I think, if you read the rules strictly as they're written, France would have to convince somebody to destroy Piedmont, or to conquer Piedmont. Maybe reestablish it as a minor, it doesn't matter. And then take it over themselves and incorporate it. In order to get to their automatic victory. This feels ridiculous. It feels absolutely ridiculous. I don't mind that Piedmont, you know, like the Batavian Republic, in theory, could exist as a minor. I'm gonna look this up. Piedmont during Savoy essentially during the Napoleonic Wars, to see what actually happened, because again, I thought this was actually incorporated during, you know, either into Italy or into France itself. They weren't actually allied with France. They gave France access. And then in 1802, France absorbed the Piedmont area. All except, well, you know, Piedmont, Savoy, whatever, Sardinia was left but that was because it was basically British occupied. I don't know what the game is trying to say, you know, but I feel like making that kind of restriction on France, that they have to lose Piedmont, which didn't historically happen, in order to annex them, in order to meet their campaign like automatic victory conditions, makes it almost impossible for France to achieve those conditions. Take out Britain, the 2 years of the continental system. Those seemed like the hard thing, but this, other players have control. They would have to actually take Piedmont away from France to allow France to be able to win the game through the automatic victory conditions. That takes all the impetus away. There's no reason to impose the continental system. There's no reason to invade Britain if you can't win the game off of those things. Again, I also don't know why the 1805 scenario doesn't start with it. Maybe it's just a typo. Maybe it should be in italics. I don't remember if Piedmontese forces were deployed at that point. But it's just infuriating to me. I'm leaving things as they are and just saying France can declare that they've annexed it if they wish. But it is a serious piss me off moment. Something else, while I try to delay dealing with the complexities of France's income, which are just a pain in the ass again because of the, you know, roll back to a point in time and then try to figure out everything, you know, that's changed from then using chits, but not everything has chits. Things like Neufchâtel do not. So there's no like little mnemonic devices to tell you to look in there. It's just painful. You basically have to scan the entire list and look at pretty much any province that either France, any territory that France originally had, or whether France has taken it since then. And you may not have, again, any device to help you find those, you know, or confirm it. So you might have to go looking on the map and try to look at your notes or whatever to see what you got. Anyway, to avoid, to delay that, what did I want to do? Oh yes, the event cards. So, at one point I was talking about, hey, I'm not sure I'm going to ever get to refresh those cards. And in the two-player game, that would be the case, right? It's only the fact that I'm pulling out an additional 5 cards each turn that's allowed me to get these replayable events up into play. But in the 7-player game, what I'm beginning to see is the same few cards are the only ones that are going to show up there. There aren't a lot of cards that are playable to any real effect. Yeah, maybe there's ones I can throw in there just to pad the deck or something that don't do me anything. But I'm finding more and more of the... So first of all, sometimes the playable, useful cards end up buried in somebody's hand who doesn't matter, right? And of most note, it's the countries on the weekend. Spain, Turkey, Prussia, the ones that are least likely to be played, that have the most incentive to make sure that there's at least a few cards in there, because they're the ones who are going to get those few cards because of the ordering there. Now, the likelihood is that cards are going to end up in other players' hands, and yeah, they probably want to play them too in the hopes that they get their cards. Britain least of all. Britain might just end up being a card sink at this point, saying, you know, I don't do a lot. I don't need money. I don't need to play with money too much. Sure, something like the inflation is useful against the, not that I have a choice, it's public. But I don't really need to play these cards. Therefore, why don't I just not, just let them pile up in my set, especially things that like cause income increases or something. English income is beginning to get to the point where I've got reasonable reserves that I'm carrying over. Could have built a navy with that. Didn't see a real reason to. Kind of got stung. An extra navy would have been useful because of all the foreign wars I was facing. But now that a foreign war has cleared up, I'm again in good shape. So I can just kind of keep up with the French builds and be okay. But anyway, I'm very worried that next time we're not going to have... This time we didn't have enough cards to deal out. Britain got shorted a card. Next time, we may not have enough for most of the players to have a card, because so many of the cards that do get played are these can only be played once, and the others, I don't know. Let's take a look at France's hand. Hussars. Yeah, useful. Could end up playing that. They just got that, by the way. Flank March, again, useful. This one, holding for a very important time. Barbary Pirates hasn't been useful. Should have used it early in the game to knock out one of the English fleets in the first turn. The Blown Camp, too valuable, one-time use. Want to use that when it's vital. And since I didn't use it in 1805, I'm looking at it as a way to beat Russia. Combat avoidance. What is combat avoidance, I say? This is combat avoidance, but maybe this is too. Not specified. I could see where it would work at sea, though. Perfidious Albion, that is never going to get played. That's fallen into a sink that will never play it. France is never going to give Britain $30. The Papacy, never going to get played. First of all, diplomacy on the Papacy is impossible right now because it's a minor that's associated with someone, and it pretty much always will be. Like, it'll either be a minor or it'll be conquered. That's a useless card. It's just a waste of card as far as I'm concerned. Maybe it has some effect in the 1792 scenario or something, but oh no, it's only in the 1805 scenario that it even shows up. Cannot even be played by the rules of the game, because you can't do the... I guess conceivably France might set the papacy up as a minor state. Would they want to? I mean, the only reason is if they didn't have Romagna or Tuscany. That's the only reason this card could have any effect. Soldier of Fortune, one-time card, going to be gone when it is. Essentially a sink there. Monarch with the Army, really, really rare usage, right? Tyrol, really, really specific usage, also only one-time use. Treaty of Tilsit, powerful card, one-time use. Gonna hold it until I want to. But France probably doesn't want to play it, simply because they really want things under the continental system, and this doesn't establish that. In ahistorical terms, the actual Treaty of Tilsit, Russia did agree to the continental system. They didn't abide by it particularly, but I think they tried early on. Flight of the Eagle. Okay, this is a really interesting card that anybody might play, but again, one time. Talleyrand, a one-time that gives diplomacy bonus. Diplomacy has no effect on play in this game. This might be useful. Okay, it might be useful right at the beginning of the game if you want a big bonus on a diplomacy roll. But diplomacy has very, very little use in the game. Things don't end up neutral minors. There's no way to get them back there. They're involved in the wars one way or another, either as absorbed or as aligned minors. It's possible someone other than France could get this, and it would allow a minor, and it's named after Talleyrand, the French foreign minister, it would allow a minor to switch sides against France if they're not adjacent and therefore satellites. In the lesser number of players, though, this card would have an effect because you could play it on major power diplomacy. Center of Operations, definitely an interesting card. Haven't, felt a desire where I really needed it. And Corsairs, which I'm going to play, that gets played constantly. But if that ever ends up outside of France's hands or their allies, like Spain might have played it on the first turn, if that ever ends up outside of France's hands, it ends up in a sink and is never going to be played. So, you see this. Most of these cards are just not going to end up in there ever. They're going to end up in some other place where they can't get played. And it just feels to me like the event card structure and design decisions made in this game are one of the many sort of root problems with the game. I don't think the game actually has any area of it that I'm happy with. Like, any of the core sections of the game, I don't think any of it works, right? Which is why I don't really understand people trying to fix this in any sort of way. It feels like it needs such a reworking, such a complete revision of the whole design. Even the thing that appealed to me the most, sort of, which was sort of the operational movement in a strategic game, like a la War and Peace, it doesn't do it as well. The core of it is nice. I like aspects of the activation chits. I like aspects of the game in some other ways, but it's got some really serious problems with it, like the attrition not limiting the size of a force. That as long as you have a supply line, you're perfectly fine. That might make sense if you could pay money channeling goods, to keep forces supplied or whatever. There are ways that this could make sense, but there are ways that the game doesn't, at all handle, and they really involve a complete reworking from the ground up of almost every system of the game. Yeah. The detachments rule. Look, maybe it serves some purpose. I can find certain reasons to use it. Why detachments are treated differently from regular forces or something along those lines. But you know what? They add so little, and if you do buy into any kind of argument resolving around them, the basic argument that I see around them is that armies can't supply things without a depot attached to the army. And that nations that don't have excess detachments can't like release the detachment to form supply lines easily. So like Turkey has just a couple of detachments. But more importantly, the miners, they have like one detachment and a regular unit, and you'd have to really kind of work your way around to get things to work right so you could run your supplies off them. But mostly it's just pain in the ass, annoyance factor stuff that doesn't really feel like it's expressing anything real. The only real thing that I can even distill from it that might make some sense is the idea that you would need a dedicated supply depot to be able to channel supplies through an army. That makes some sense in a vague sort of way, but it seems so minor for the overhead that rule imposes on play of the game. In the number of ways it does. And other than that, I can see no argument for why you can't have detachments in armies and why they're treated differently from everything else. It's kind of neat being able to reinforce with them and not cause an activation pollution. I'm not sure that's even believable. Again, I don't know if that's meant to abstract away where the detachment actually is, that it's, a constant flow of troops instead of an actual piece that can be fought on the ground, which actually can be in the game, and all kinds of shit like that. There's just so many places where everything just like, it feels like maybe attempts at patching here and there were made, but there was no real coherent vision for any of the major subsystems of this game that would drive the system. It feels like a really, really early prototype to me in terms of how well it's finished. Not something that was anywhere near publication, right? But more likely something that was, we can't resolve the issues here. Fuck it. That feels like how it got published. We've been working and trying to resolve it, but at the core there's enough problems, and we're committed to publishing it. So screw it, let's roll it out the door. Through another issue I came to, I'm running down through these. The second thing province I hit is Ansbach, over here. Yeah, it's Prussian. The annoyance of these things that are useless in a lot of ways in the game. Ansbach's worth a buck if France conquers it. Somehow or another Bavaria gets it. I don't know if it's required in the Kingdom of Bavaria or allowed in it. I don't think so. Fuck. You can just see Tyrol to Bavaria splitting off Berg. Ansbach can be added. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, Ansbach is an almost useless thing, but I could have conquered it over the winter. It would still be useless, but at least I could add it to the Kingdom of Bavaria if I had conquered it. But yeah, it's this minor little, it's such a little picayune thing, kind of like Geneva and Neuchâtel are, that it feels like they just shouldn't even be dealt with it at the level of the game. They're just adding clutter to it. It's clutter. It's clutter that doesn't add anything to the game. Is the real problem? I could understand the desire for that level of detail in a game that worried about details at other places. But like I've expressed, the operational system in this game kind of devolves into something that's not too different from how the area-based games kind of feel. It doesn't really feel like the hexes are adding much. It doesn't feel like where the detail is added that it does a shit ton to the game. Fuck. I mean, it feels so fucking pointless in so many ways. And, yeah. Now, you have Ansbach in War and Peace. It's included in there. And I don't know if it serves much purpose there, because I don't think it's a production location. But it also isn't a big burden there. It falls easily. If it's of any importance, it has a fortress in it. If it's not of importance, it doesn't, and you can just kind of ignore it. One of the few games I've seen that puts one of Napoleon's best marshals in it at this sort of at this strategic level, right? Which is Suchet. He was very, very effective in Spain. Now, he's got a rating which is great for moderate-sized forces, but he's also a 4 initiative +2 army commander. Now, granted, he can only command a smaller army. I may actually swap him out if I have another army commander who has a small force. I have some smaller forces here. The Army of Spain, for example. I think the others are too big. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, yeah. The Army of Spain, if it's under an iffy commander, I may swap that out, because Suchet's kind of a waste leading just a 6-stack. I actually didn't even use him, I don't know for how many years. He was there last year and he didn't get used. Yeah, he came in 09. I haven't used him because, oh no, that's not him. This is him. Looks like 08. And he's really an outstanding commander in a lot of different ways. But he also makes a good subordinate +2, the way like Ney does. If we take a look at someone like Ney, who makes it into almost every game, he's an iffy army commander in this, and I think that's appropriate. Ney was primarily useful, within an army. Saint-Cyr is the name that I wanted to capture. But these are also, Suchet's also only 2-star, which means he can only command 4 on his own, which means you kind of want him in charge of an army, but he was really, really effective in Spain. Like, the only French commander who was actually effective in Spain. Napoleon was so-so. But Suchet, really, he was there for a long time and he did a lot of great stuff. And he doesn't show up in most games. And that's something that appeals to me a little bit. Of course, it gives you this capability to use, his really good stats somewhere else, which is what I'm going to be doing. Always has a place to put their money, because, their navy is unbuilt. I'm ending up with 19 extra bucks, which is more than I'd like, but I wanted to build another Corsair because that can have more effect maybe. But I basically built all the French pieces. There's no miners that I can loan additional money to give them more capability than they already have. If Bavaria, I don't know. Some of the miners, if they lose, like Bavaria, if it loses Berg, which I think it actually did, should cost me some money. Yeah, that was $2. Bavaria itself is a 6-2, and I think I built a 7-point unit. I did, so I owe an extra $1 for that because I lost Berg. But most of the miners can build their manpower as much as they like without any real problem. So that kind of fits in that way. But yeah, I have more money than I need for France, but that means I can use it with... I have more manpower than I need too, right? I have nothing I can do with all of this. That's one of the arguments for not converting things like Piedmont if you have an option in that kind of matter, because those are extra counters, and with 5 big armies that I can't really fill up, it only makes sense to try to get as many counters as I can. I felt like I had to convert Hanover and Holland, though, by the rules. If Piedmont fell, I would have to convert that. But yeah, there's also other ugly little things like Cleves. Somehow or another, it ended up French. I don't know what happened for that to happen. It started out as a Prussian, maybe, I don't know. I don't know how Cleves converted over. Right now I've got it as French possession. France only went to war with Prussia now, and they didn't just conquer it. It's been there for a while, so I don't know what's going on with that, but like Cleves and Thuringia, which are really kind of annoying minors in terms of like the space they take up. Thuringia especially so because it doesn't even have a fortress in it. I'm just going to leave things where they are, where France somehow has Cleves as part of its empire. It doesn't show up as such here. It shows up as part of Prussia as in 1805, whatever, I don't know. But I'm in no state to deal with the English after this. The English are easier than the French, I guess. They have their complexities, though, with the escorts. They sent the Spanish to their foreign war good. Yeah, they have their complexity with the escorts and with possibly devoting money to other countries, but I think Russia built all their manpower. Austria built everything. Could lend money to Prussia, I guess, but they actually have extra money. I think they built all theirs as well. I certainly didn't set anything aside to indicate, oh, they have more. Generally, you can, if you're not building a lot of toys. Now, Russia actually is close. They have a hard time because they do have a lot of toys that are expensive and everything. Anyway, I just don't have the will to do the economics for both France and Britain at this point. Okay, did the English finances, kind of fucked up with the escorts, but in the sense that I forgot to calculate, I forgot to keep in mind what their trade value was, but I think I got it right anyway, close enough. They ended up not only getting the couple of fleets for the India adventure out of the way, but they ended up also being able to buy 3 fleets plus buy a Danish fleet and the Neapolitan fleet. So now they have a huge excess of ships in the line. I do have to remember the French need to buy, they lost another Corsair, and they have enough money that they would have been able to purchase that back and put 5 Corsairs in the box. It was only a 10% hit this time on 3 Corsairs, but I got to get more escorts out there. There's no question of that, if I can remember. But, you know, otherwise, England can't really fill out their armies very heavily while they're deployed, but deploying big armies is hard too. They have a real problem with, you know, fielding a big army and keeping it stocked up and everything. And they have to constantly be playing around with their boats to manage that. We should be in pretty good shape, though, where I can try to concentrate on cutting down the French Corsairs. At least, I don't know. I ended up using up all of Britain's money, but nobody else needed it this turn. And it's just a matter of, hey, they have 4 places that they can build boats. I think that's all they have. If they ended up being able to absorb a miner, they might be able to get more, but that's not really necessary anyway. I don't think they can, because they're not adjacent. They don't have territory adjacent to them. So pretty much everything they capture, I don't know, possibly if they could take territory from a major power. I don't know if they have any way that they can get territory. Unlike in Empires in Arms, where North Africa is incredibly valuable to them, the English don't really occupy. It's incredibly valuable to them because it's low money, high manpower. It's not very valuable to anyone else except the Turks who want to create the Ottoman Empire. But in this, it's just not really very valuable to anyone except Turkey. And what about diplomacy? Do we have anything that we see happening here? I mean, take a look at Spain. They could try to help knock France out, to cause a major distraction to the French. The Spanish are one of the more weak powers, though. They haven't built up their army yet. They're very slow at doing so. I think I did their economics. They're involved in a foreign war right now. It just doesn't seem like a good time to do anything. Feels to me like they want to make their gains at the end of the game. They're not going to be able to break France, is basically the thing. Even if France is open to being attacked, there are still armies that could be devoted down in that direction if Spain decided to take advantage of this current situation. We're just not poised for it. But we probably do want to set ourselves up so that in a year or two, when we can build our forces, we are. Obviously, Britain could be funding the Spaniards, but again, it's not going to break France, right? It's not going to. And does Britain have a way of ending the game? They must. Everybody has an automatic victory condition. Okay. They have to have more fleets on the map than any other major power. That's easy. They need Antwerp, Gibraltar, Cairo, Lisbon, Hamburg, and Amsterdam. I think our goal might be to set ourselves up, even though we put our fleet up there to deal with the French, that looks like a losing proposition to me. I think our best move is to start hunting the Turks down and take the Ottoman Empire away from them. We'll say that they don't get their victory points if they don't currently possess it. The victory conditions actually, well, they won't get their victory points. I think Turkey does have, this is the hard part. Can you take away the has created the Ottoman Empire piece? Or is it of the nature of has invaded and conquered Britain? Which might mean Britain is currently under, an enforced peace or something. Or continental system has been in effect for at least 2 winter phases. Do those only take place if they're still applicable in some way or another? That's the big question. And it's really hard to tell because, like the continental system one, I think that can only be assessed in the winter victory phases, because if it's continual, it's impossible. It is absolutely impossible, because one nation or another will crop up and say, yeah, I'm not part of it anymore, one way or another, to prevent the victory. So the only way France has a way of completing that is to be able to pop each boil as it occurs, essentially. And right now there are a lot, right? They didn't get Austria. Prussia they could enforce it on. Russia, maybe if they win, they can enforce it on. But then they'd have to go back at Austria. Spain, they'd have to enforce it on. Turkey would immediately make a peace if, So if I were to say, hey, Turkey could substitute for Spain, well, Turkey would have to immediately then make a peace if that were the kind of situation with the coalition to prevent France from winning. That opens an interesting situation where it's like, hey, Spain, you going to go to war with France? No. Hey, Turkey, you going to go to peace with us? No. You know, like, all right, but one of you has to, which might make it easier to say, look, it's Spain's duty, not Turkey's, because in the Banania rules, which presumably came from some sort of errata, Trieste is the limiting spot, and that Turkey doesn't even matter towards it. But, I mean, Turkey with North Africa feels more important than Spain, so fuck that. Yeah. Given that they're both disassociated from continental Europe, and again, I'm just making those fucking ideas up as I go. So, where was I? I think I was no diplomatic changes whatsoever at this point. And that means we will be up to the cup here in 1811. Going to create the initiative pool, whatnot. I don't feel like the English need to put another chip in, but then again, I also don't feel like the French need to put one. The only loose fleet right now is here. There are some possibilities of some French built-up fleets being able to break their way out, but it just doesn't seem worth it, especially without any French troops sitting near England to gain that victory condition. Because, you know, when I gave up raid, my feeling was, okay, you know, this is what I need to do. It's eating up all my time. Yeah, I'm finding ways to fuck around and get rid of all my time anyway. That, I mean, some of it's reading, but most of it's not. Most of it's just as pointless as raid is. And if anything, I feel even less effective than I was back then. Maybe the structure of raid helped me to some extent or another. I don't know. I'm not going back to it, but I am supposed to start a test on another game of its sort that maybe will hook me. I don't know. It just doesn't, you know, I blame so much on the addiction, but the truth of the matter is I find my way around it. The one thing the addiction prevented me from was when opportunities came up, they were more difficult to cope with. Like, you know, going out to the river or going out to eat or something like that. But that doesn't happen very often. If it did, I wouldn't mind at all. But yeah, I mean, Jesus. And there are other factors to why I've kind of fallen apart even more now. Economic phase. I mean, look, I haven't been away from the game too much. I played it out and everything. I was playing it last night. The economic phase didn't come after a long break, but it feels like there's a long break because of the effort spent on fiddling with all that crap and everything, where I'm like, yeah, now I don't know what I'm doing anymore in this game. Just the focus of attention to something else that's... It's funny because this doesn't happen in other games that have a significant economic phase. First of all, take a look at Empires in Arms, which I feel... It's not as cumbersome as this in a lot of ways, but there's more of them. But you're just, you know, calculating out your forces and whatever. But I'm going to turn to EU, which has a significant economic phase. But the point is, the things that you're trying to do, it feels like you're focusing on in the economic phase, you know, whatever you're trying to do, because it's not entirely a military game. If you're trying to expand, you know, colonies and whatnot, all that kind of stuff, all those efforts kind of fit in along with what you're going to do in the next turn. The military does sometimes get a little blurred in with all that effort, but if you're focusing on the military, that particular country, is actually paying attention to that, building up armies and everything. Here, yeah, I'm building up armies, but there's not a lot of direction to it. It's more just, yeah, let's keep, let's just pump up some numbers and everything. Most of the effort in it is spent on trying to figure out just how many bucks do I get. Some of it comes down to this whole chip pull thing too, because it's not like I can figure out what my turn's going to be, It's jumbled up and scrambled over the course of things. So now I'm looking, I got an Empire land move. Look, do I want to activate my Empire units, or do I want to risk not getting them in time? Am I worried about getting supply cut? Maybe. Everything's kind of fucked up in that sort of way that, like, I've got a lot of considerations that don't really feel all that real. But there's concerns like, look, is Prussia going to continue rolling over? Or did the builds that they had this turn make it so that it's worth it for them to fight out this war? I don't think they want to fight it out. But then there's also the complexity of the surrender rolls. I know, they're not that complex. But Prussia, I have to have Königsberg, Berlin, and Warsaw to affect the surrender. That's an obnoxious set of things that I can remember right now because I was just looking at them, within the last couple of days. But each nation has its own that are complex and everything. It's not, I don't know. I mean, again, if I think at the Empires in Arms level or the EU level, they tend to be a uniform set of rules. There might be multiple capitals to some countries, which you have to take both to force the surrender, blah, blah, blah. It's also the truth that you can, in like Empires in Arms, you can declare your surrender at the level you want. Like, you get to decide, do I want to fully surrender? First of all, am I forced to? Secondly, do I want to fully surrender or, surrender a limited victory? In EU, the surrender is just calculated, right? If both sides agree, it's just over at that level. And the extreme level is quite heavy. I don't know. I'm just finding this, again, the game is cumbersome in lots of little ways that, like, just aren't adding anything. The net effect of what I chose to do was to take Königsberg, fall back a little bit on my supply line, and hope for the best. This is kind of nice because it definitely protects Königsberg from any kind of attack. I've got chances if he tries to slip behind me, but he could still cut my supply lines, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4. I wasn't able to get far enough. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4. You know what? I actually could go here, which is even better. Because that protects my supply line one way or the other, depending on how he cuts it. I think he could just cut this, which then, yeah, I'm out with a major force. I don't really think I want to launch an attack here. These forces, if I get a Empire 1, I can actually pump into there because I'm allowing detachments into forces one at a time, into armies one at a time, so that could actually bolster my armies to about as full a strength as they can be, with Susham in charge of one of them. And I don't know, Victor, yeah, I can move him, but he doesn't have a lot he can do. Since it's a 4 chit, it doesn't give me, it doesn't let me move a lot of my forces. And I'm fatigued having thought about all of this. So I'm going to go do something else. Thing though, the first chits, no matter what, are expensive as you try to figure out everything you're going to do. Later chits, if you've moved a lot of pieces, aren't. But if you didn't move a lot of pieces, you may have big things you still want to do that you left off. So like this 4 coming up, it's really painful because it means that the next Empire chit is also going to be an expensive chit. Whereas if like a low number one had come up, I probably would have moved a lot of my forces for fear of the winter quarters happening in spring or whatever. Kind of extensive coalition naval move. I shipped the Peninsular Army out, and I don't know where I got it. I guess it made it down there. Into Oporto? Or not? Yeah, we made it into Oporto. I thought I pulled another force down, but I don't see another force. Put something guarding the channel because I'm a little worried right now. I don't have to get escorts into play until winter, basically, but you might not want to chance winter. My hope is to get out of here. I think I have room for another detachment. I'm not positive. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, I have room for that other detachment if I slip up into Copenhagen. We're going to ask the Prussians to put their fleet into the Cataract. Just to keep the French from getting up there. They're willing to do it. What the hell? And my intention here is to take the Ottoman Empire away, at least by taking something away. Oh, I know. Another fleet landed troops down here, which will be able to actually invade. And I've got ships there that moved out of it. Now it's Wednesday. Getting around 2 in the morning. I probably ought to get to sleep if I'm going to want to get enough sleep that I can do my shopping, but I woke up so goddamn late, like 4, 5 somewhere, 4:30 I think. Anyway, we had neutral land. The Spaniards shifted forces north in case they want to hit France. They really don't think that they can take the war to the English, especially with the English moving down into this position. But then we got an Empire naval chit, and that was interesting. The French made a successful breakout here, actually sinking 3 British fleets. Well, 1 was Swedish. Then came hit this, were defeated by a smaller fleet, or squadron, because squadrons are bigger than fleets. But then they continued probing up here and here. Here they lost a fleet. Here, it was less enticing to make the attack. The Turks don't want to join in on this. They're not allied. And they don't want to lose their fleet or fleets. They want to be able to ship stuff around because they're going to have to, either ship troops from North Africa or to North Africa, depending on the situation. All right. I should have done this earlier, but if the Barbary pirates are out, I had an advantage, but let's see if we can sink that one of those fleets. Yeah, we got one. I'm going to randomize which one because it's hidden, essentially. It'll be this one. I guess it takes a leader loss check for whatever it's worth. Cards, it's hard to remember what the hell you have, especially, even if I wasn't playing solo, the French with their huge stack of cards would be hard to remember. The English, though, have a weather gauge card, and just didn't bother playing it, again, because these stacks of cards, it's hard enough in games where the cards are a dominant part of the game, like in a CDG or something. But at least you're looking at them all the time there. Here, it's just the Yeah, I have the opportunity to use a card. It's just really, really painful to me. And when cards are, when you kind of qualify to yourself, even if you're just playing alone, that, the cards, whatever, they usually don't do anything. Not like a game like War of the Ring or whatever, the old SPI one, not the Fantasy Flight one where cards are really integral to it. You end up, you know, constantly checking your cards. Maybe it would be easier in two players or whatever. With 7 different hands playing solo, they just really drift out of mind. But I have to say, even when I'm playing these games opposed, if I've got a fistful of cards, I'm gonna forget what they are if they're like, incidental things I can use in rare occasions, basically. They're playing out a kind of, hey, what happens if we take Berlin and we cut this off or whatever? And England's like, look, you had to tell me earlier, I've already divested or diverted some of my troops over towards North Africa. Screw you, man. Although diplomacy is kind of not even really allowed at this point, it's hard to tell. What about table talk? Yeah, I don't know. Because a lot of diplomacy could be done right at the table. I don't remember. There's specifics about it. I don't remember what they are. But it feels like you should be able to coordinate military operations and such not among allies that's outside the diplomacy side of things. Which, anyway, the English pulled their army back, which means the Prussian idea of taking Berlin to try to stay alive a little longer, give Russia a little bit more time to deal with its issues with the Turks. Feels a little hard, but I'm going to try to see if there's something of value I can do with the Prussians, because they would like to hurt the French. Indeed are. The French had overextended. I swept the supply source here and captured Warsaw. Either way, that throws Napoleon's big force out of supply and, importantly, towards the surrender. I took Warsaw and it throws Königsberg out of supply. So Prussia will not be forced to surrender at this point, meaning that I can play around with my Russians a little bit more. France, I mean, it was really hard, right? I battered the Prussian armies, but they were able to rebuild over the winter. And this positioning, well, it didn't prevent a move. I don't know where the Prussians were hiding, but it didn't prevent, probably here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah. It didn't prevent a move that basically wiped out the French position. Is it as bad as I think? Maybe not. On the French turn, what they can do is they have supply wagons in those armies. They can just send a leader out with the supply wagon, reestablish supplies, hit Warsaw. If they take it, and I leave a supply wagon here, we still get the surrender. But it does delay things another turn at the least. But I guess the most important thing is this army, it will not have to undergo a supply check at the end of the turn because it already moved. And it will not have to, if I'm right about that. I don't remember. I think that's the case. That's how I've been playing it. Yeah, only out of supply units that were not activated. And on the next turn, look, if the coalition gets to go first, the Prussian army could sweep up and hit Napoleon's bigger force while it's out of supply and maybe gain something there. That's kind of risky because the Prussian army isn't that big. But on the other side, if the French go first, they can throw themselves back into supply, destroy the Prussian army, and capture Warsaw. So this was kind of I don't know if you really should do this, Prussia, but here's the thing. 2 years out of the war, I can recover that Prussian army So maybe it's worth, fighting to the last man just to try to push things over. That'll put me in a position where sometime in 1813 or whatever, maybe 1814, I'll have a whole fort. Well, 1814 is hard. I think that's when the scenario ends, actually. It'll be kind of hard. I mean, Prussia will be in a position to be rolling if the coalition is ready to roll, as much as they would anyhow. And it doesn't make a lot of difference. But if the game ends in 1814, this may have been a little bit more risky, just in terms of time. And I think it does, which feels weird, but winter 1814, yep. There's no reason for an 1815. Well, maybe there's a Waterloo scenario. I don't know. It just, so much of this game, the fact that it doesn't handle, even Napoleon being exiled and coming back, it doesn't it's a game that I expected to go from 1792 to 1815. And it just, not only does it not do that, it doesn't even do as much as War and Peace does, right? The old game from the 70s. And in just so many ways, this feels inferior. The next shit up was a coalition land 2. I'm going in reverse here, but the English captured Tangiers. Pretty easy. That doesn't end the Ottoman Empire yet, but it will before victory points are assessed in the winter phase, so that's sufficient. The Russians took Kiev and moved forward, and I think we did a little overrun and a run back here. It's still dangerous. The Turks are still a dangerous factor. I need this other army to stay in this area and beat up the Turks until and unless they're willing to let the war fucking go. And, unless they sign some sort of mandatory peace agreement in it, which I guess you can negotiate. Again, everything's kind of blurry there, but it feels like you can negotiate whatever the fuck you want in those. I don't know if you can make an entente that does the same kind of thing, right? But what that means is that Kutuzov could actually conceivably come up and end up supporting the Prussians, which would be a pretty big deal. But he's got a long walk. And I chose to go up this way because I was at Kiev. Going around the swamp is hard. So, yeah. All right, that's it for there. I don't know. Later, after trying to sleep for about an hour and failing. I got an Empire Land 1. This is the big Empire Land one. Where I can move all my detachments and stuff like that. Did a lot of reshuffling, shuffling around. Again, no real reason for Napoleon to make his move here. The forced march seems like a bad idea. Yeah, it's going to slow me down on Russia. But, it's just what has to be done, I guess. I'm holding off on moving Davout's armies here. I'm not sure why. What does he have? He has Spain and North. North is not this one, that's Italy. I do not have... Well, I know why, because I threw a bunch of detachments illegally into there. Yeah. So I'm hoping to get another movement and move that force together into a more applicable position. But those Spanish are scaring me. And I may need to dispatch a force into France instead. It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell, But, yeah, and the Turks shifted a bunch of their feudals forward. I don't really see a need to move these guys because the Russian main forces have already moved. They're probably not going to force march to try to get themselves tied up in Turkey. Guess we break again. I don't know. A bit later we come up and we get to the third winter quarters. Only one coalition landmarker was left out. That means the coalition will get to go first next turn for whatever that matters. I don't think it's too big a deal. Not a lot happened. I was kind of just pulling chits and not doing anything. A little bit of movement. The one French army that was up near Denmark at Mecklenburg, it's not going to be able to conquer Mecklenburg until winter, so they shifted over, putting myself in a somewhat stronger position, I guess. If I can capture Posen with that army, that frees this up. The real question, of course, is, does Prussia want to surrender or not? Do they want to get beaten up some more? They got away this turn because I didn't want to force march with anything with the French. But it does mean more forces, all the French armies are actually in place, coming towards the Russian border at this point. That's ignoring the Spanish problem, but we shall see. I mean, Spain alone could defeat France, right? If there's nothing in the way. And there's not much in the way right now. Put us into the summer. No big surrenders or anything like that. And no big attrition rolls. La la la. Back down for another video or something. Maybe I come back up. Maybe I start feeling tired. I thought I was tired. Turns out, nah. To the summer turn. I'm up real early. I got like a couple hours of sleep. I think I'm kind of ride or die in terms of going shopping today. We'll see. I'm tired, but I'm waiting a little bit to warm up, take a dump, whatever. It hasn't come upon me yet, and I figured I'd start this summer turn in the scenario. Now, I did my purchases, which really were just a French depot. They have a fair amount of money. It's not a huge amount, but I feel like a depot in the armies up here. No, those aren't armies. The armies up here would be useful to give me more flexibility towards getting Napoleon hooked up and in command. This is going to relate a little bit to sequence of play. Spain is in a position where they're close to moving forward to attacking France. If they do so, Prussia may choose to try to stay in the war. They may even choose it mid-turn, essentially. They're not going to surrender right now, right? They don't have the option. Now, Prussia's army is pretty beaten up. The Spanish army is in perfect shape, but there's nothing facing Spain. But we could be looking at the full coalition happening. If we think about the whole situation right now, Austria is available to come in, not next turn, I think the turn after. Maybe it's next turn. Do I have an intel? Yeah, I think the Prussian troops are given back. Yeah, I think the mandatory peace ends, and this is the last turn of it. And so the Austrians are available with a full army to come into play. It's painful for everyone because there's so many fronts, right? There's the Italian area that's of interest. There's the Turks that are of interest. there's the big French threat that's of interest, right? Italian front is empty. A small force could actually operate, but it can't take Mantua, which is vital. So I feel like I have to send an army down that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll a die and see if Spain kicks off the sequence by declaring war. And it's just going to be an odd, yes, even, no. And they choose not to. It's a pity because it is a powerful situation. And if diplomacy were allowed here, even a tabletop, across the table diplomacy, England could tell them, look, we'll bring Wellington down and help you. Or alternatively, they could say the same to the Prussians. We'll bring Wellington down, or they could just signal it, bringing Wellington back into play as another threat to keep the French occupied. Because, you know, if the French are having to fight everyone, the Spanish will make it, you know, they can conquer everything with their army if it's unopposed and split off forces from it and whatnot. This turn, they would be able to get Bayonne. That puts a threat on Bordeaux. Bordeaux is not vital, but it is a double value area. And what they need to get is, I believe, Paris and Lyon. I'm not sure. I don't remember what the French surrender conditions are. I can never remember. You know, again, in War and Peace and in Empires and Arms, it's easy. Here, it's look this up. Paris, Bordeaux, and Lyon. Yeah. And Antwerp. Antwerp is vital as well. That makes it a lot harder. Spain could take up into here pretty easily if it's unopposed, but very obviously there's French forces closer to Antwerp than, and closer to Paris too, but yeah. So maybe they made the right decision there, but that pretty much means that this grand coalition is unlikely. And then there's kind of the question of, does Austria really want to enter the war to try to save Russia's ass without any help when maybe the grand coalition can be over here instead? I don't know. Hard time getting up here today. I did my shopping. Yay! But on so little sleep that I wanted to take a nap, and I also drank a little bit and listened to the wall and went back to sleep again. Little bits of sleep here and there. I'm still feeling pretty fatigued, but you know, I got what needed to be done, I guess, to keep surviving a little longer. I have hopes that, like, I can turn things around and start doing stuff again. You know, it's so pathetic because at my best, I do so much less than anyone else. And at my worst, I'm struggling to stay alive, essentially. France playing the heavy fog modifier, getting them to a +6, I think. They managed to roll shitty enough that they got caught out of supply by the Prussian army. Wow. They missed by 1. They had a 1 in 12 chance of missing that. Ouch. Okay. Well, we got a major battle going on. This is, that -4 is still probably not enough. Getting the rule that doesn't show up in the combat section, where it needs to be, that artillery needs supplies to be effective. Let's open up. The Prussians start with a year 2 soldiers. That gets them a +1. That's great. I didn't check their morale, but I'm sure it's 3 or higher. That's just regulars. And they go with a defense in depth, which will cancel the echelon. I put a 0 leader to give this because it's a cancellation card. The opponent has to play the right card, and we didn't get that. What did the French not play? The French didn't play surprise. They're expecting that there's some cav, and there is. There's a cav leader, Blucher. Square, this is tempting. This cancellation card is a good one because Grand Charge is so good. And I got another one that gets rid of Grand Charge a little easier. Great. Whatever. We opened up with a flank attack. Now, I'm sure I have a +2 secondary leader. I do. But this gives a big +3, so it's a very powerful card. And the +2 gives me that. That's going to put France in much, much better shape. And guess what? Echelon! Which just automatically hits in place. So, yeah. It was important that they played the defense in depth. Don't even use Saint-Cyr or Ney. They just go with a +1 because they're at 11-6, even without the artillery bonus. The Prussians aren't all that bad off, but it's not good. That puts the French at the top of the chart, and 6 and 6 is 12. So yeah, Prussia's going to get hammered. I got to roll for the echelon. They succeeded. They went with a +1 on that. There was no pursuit. Prussians managed to take some officer casualties, but on a 1-turn delay, they don't seem that important. Again, I don't know what's supposed to be the next year, what's supposed to be the next turn. I'm mostly doing it just next turn because there's a spring interphase every turn. Summer turn, and there's no winter quarters in the summer turn. The only turns that there aren't, there's no real reason to move things early in the turn. The only reason in this would be to move units that are on their own, which, you know, detachments or whatever, which I saw, corps, which I saw none in existence, or something that I really want to get the jump on, like those Prussians with their shot at capturing an out of supply French army. And you know what? I forgot the -4 for being out of supply. Fuck. Oops. I don't know. We'll leave it. I may have put it in. I don't think so, though. I don't think so. That +10 is quite high. But I would have thrown Saint-Cyr in that case. So instead of a +10, it would have been 3 less. I was over the limit, or was I exact? I think I was over the limit by a couple. So I probably would have gotten a step back. Fuck it. We'll leave it as it is. Anyway, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I was exactly at 17. But I see an 8 here, but that's not the number I rolled, because I rolled leader loss checks afterwards. So who knows? Who knows? Either way, the French would have won the battle. It might mean a couple of steps that the Prussians got back. It was worth the shot. Demoralizing the French force would have put it in a much, much trickier position and maybe made it worthwhile. The one thing that wouldn't be worth the chance is the fact that the Prussian army could end up having taken a pursuit. In fact, it was very, very likely. They had a 1 in 6 chance of surviving, and they managed to get that. We'll just leave things as they are. And even though I only moved 1 stack, this was fatiguing enough because I had to look everywhere, and I had to think, and I had to do a major battle. Shopping-wise, I get no goodies anymore. Trying to lose some weight, that might help. The only thing I got as goodies was, well, I got some day-old bagels, which are yummy and make for heavier, tastier sandwiches. And I got myself an 18 pack of beer, because my 18 pack of beer from last year was down to the last 2 cans, and I'm like, I'm not going to drink the last 2 cans. So, again, always have reserves. I forgot my shopping list, but I only missed, like, I think 1 thing that I kinda, like, most of what I get is pretty automatic, but I put things on my list that are like not my always get this stuff. And I think I missed 1 or 2 things. One of them was really unimportant. The other one, I don't remember what it was either, but like, yeah, I want these things again anyway. Oh, but I also noticed that my cart, and this was on the way there that I noticed it, and like not that far from my house, my cart took more damage than I thought. The wheel is kind of chewed up. I'm not sure I want to go again on that wheel. I have another plastic wheel still that from my old cart. I threw one out. That is in better shape, or I might end up putting my metal wheels on and see how they work. But for me to do that, I think I have to go to a hardware store and get little caps for the wheels and maybe some more cotter's pins. The little chits out, the neutral land, yeah, the Spaniards moved forward, the Austrians thought about moving. Not sure they're going to enter next turn, and I'm just kind of like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. And then I got the Empire Naval, and there was a British fleet out here, probably because of the it was probably defeated by the French somehow, or something, before, and then the Corsairs, I think, knocked off another ship or something like that. I'm not sure, but the French were able to knock that out, move here, but then they got their asses kicked trying to break out of St. Malo, where they had an even shot, but against Nelson, no less. He has some crap with him, and the French have their best fleet there. Elsewhere, the Empire doesn't really have navies, but if they could, if they could have broken out here, maybe with a role that, caused a loss on the coalition, then they could pick at this or whatever, and start slicing up the British fleet advantage. Sure, they've got some ships over there still, and overall the coalition as a whole just has a lot more fleets, but it's okay. Anyway, we're going to pause there because even though it wasn't a hell of a lot to do, I don't really feel like pulling a big chit now. I never feel like pulling a big chit, to tell you the truth. Like, I just want this to end, and that's why I come up, is to play a little bit more and advance the game a little further. I know a lot of people would just quit. I feel like the game still has an interesting story to tell. I just don't like playing it. Up for a bit, we get a coalition naval, and this English fleet went and attacked whoever was blockading us over here in Porto or whatever. Drove them back and threw them into a blockade. I've got too many ships here because I killed 2 French fleets. So, but, you know, in terms of like leaving passageways for other stuff and things like that, this was the more reasonable move. Then the fleet that was blockaded moved up with more and took Algiers. An assault on the city. I don't think the naval assault counts when you establish a siege. It only counts if you have to fight a land battle in the Hex, and the Algerian force would have been overrun if it had tried to hold off. The complexity of the different sized armies made me screw something up. I had Suchet's army of Spain down here, too filled, and there was room for a couple of steps in the army of the north that's stacked with him, so that could have been absorbed. But beyond the, hey, you shouldn't be using detachments in armies, which allows you to have too many of these armies too big a size. That is a potential effect. Again, I can't think of anything historically that makes it say that whatever armies are, that you couldn't coalesce that many. You know, I just don't know. You know, it's like, yeah, you could have a lot of armies that are like size 8 or 10 on the field, but like, if you wanted them all to be commanded by the commanders that they could be commanded by, you can't actually fill them all out or something like that. You know, it just doesn't make sense to me, right? I have no rationale behind why that particular restriction would be in place, but it is one that would affect the game. But anyway, I've got Eugene back on the board with a couple of steps. He's taken over the garrison at Berlin. He could have dropped a couple of, I don't know, because you can't drop fucking units off. I have no idea how I could have done it. You can't just like put leaders in for the movement and everything. So physically, I might not have been able to shuffle the troops quite the way I did. But if I had spaced them out more and put more leaders on the board, yeah, I could have. It's, again, the whole fucking like stacking and the mechanisms involved in like what you're allowed to have in a hex and what you're not are just really getting in the way of trying to play. I don't mind these leader stacking rules for how big an army they can command. I feel like that's actually appropriate, although that's what caused this problem, at least to some extent. But, you know, I mean, I had like this guy here, a 1-star leader. Because I had a 1-star leader in charge at Berlin with a step, it meant I couldn't leave 2 more steps behind with him. But if I had been wiser and put a 2-star leader in there, I would have been fine, but I can't like split that off or just create that on the fly, even though if I get wounded, there are leaders who appear on the fly just that way. And it's like, okay, where are all these like random leaders who can show up wherever the fuck you want in case of an injury? And obviously at the beginning of the turn, fine, you know, you have to do that kind of figuring and everything. But anyway, I've got an Empire land too. What I'm trying to do is figure out a way to get my supplies, and one way to do that would be to capture Posen. Then Napoleon's free. Since Blucher did not get demoralized, I can just ream him out and then work on taking Warsaw this turn. And that, you know, if I destroy the entire Prussian army, which could well happen, and take Berlin, then Prussia will surrender this turn finally. The, the thing is, in any game, when the mechanisms are different enough from other things that you're familiar with, it's going to cause this kind of friction, right? I feel like these are painfully different in the same way like Labatt's terrain movement, which is very much like Mini's terrain movement, or for that matter, Battles of the Age of Reason, which uses a similar sort of system. I feel like they just get in the way no matter how familiar you are with them. They're clunkier, and this one, they're clunkier. But on top of that, there's even with me playing it, it's still pretty unfamiliar. I haven't figured out the patterns to cope with it. Now, we could compare this to a game like, well, one of them was this guy, Banish All Their Fears, which had very different kind of systems that were clunky and kind of, they're not particularly clunky, but they're different enough that you had to worry about things that you don't normally have to worry about. But they're not all that clunky, which means you can get around it if you make up some rules to make it work. Because as written, it kind of, and envisioned, it kind of doesn't work. With the idea of like the terrain on the battlefield fixing who's in command of where. Another one that was similar to that was a World War I one, these 1914 games. They also have like borders, but those are more reasonable because they're flexible between units or between commands. And again, it's kind of a complicated thing. It works differently from other games. I'm sure I can think of other things that kind of work differently. I guess the great campaigns of the American Civil War with rolling dice for movement and stuff like that, that I agree with 100%, but it gets kind of clunky to play with. But all the same, I understand the why behind it. But with this, the frictions that come from the different system don't feel like they really add anything to it. Like I said, unlike War and Peace, this feels more like an area game than anything else. Just because you got a big force, nothing can stand against it. You know, you bring more, and it's not because of the ratio difference. It's not because of the odds differences. It's because the more force you have, the more you're going to get the +2 from artillery, the +2 from cavalry, and all that. The more you're going to have additional leaders. And armies are just such a big step up from everything else that there's like not really much comparison there. But anyway, it's just the stacking rules for this are just so weird, and I don't really feel like they add a hell of a lot. I feel like you should be able to park forces someplace, and maybe there'd be, like in Empires in Arms, a limit to how big a force, you know, how well you can command a force that is too big for you. That's one of the things in Empires in Arms, is that like leaders are rated for how many troops they can command in battle, and they lose battle capability if they exceed that. So it's not like it's the stacking rules. It feels that way. It ends up playing out that way, but it's like it still follows the a rational understanding of how the world works. These hexes are not so tiny. You know, I mean, the truth of the matter is I'm allowed to stack 3 16-step armies, which means I can have a ridiculous amount of force in an area. But I can't have 2 forces in the same area, right? That could be a huge area, right? I mean, Ansbach this is the entire territory of Ansbach. There could certainly be a couple of forces in there operating independently. But you can't do that in this game. You can't have forces operating independently, and you can't even have them in the same area, in the same hex, essentially, because I don't know why. It's not like they'd be depopulating, the chickens in the area or whatever. I can have 3 fucking armies, with 48 strength points, actually make it 50 if you have Napoleon with you, because he's a little bigger, as are all the kings. But it's like, but I couldn't have 2 detachments there operating separately under different commands. Maybe only one of them gets to fight or whatever. I've seen games that handle shit like that. But no, they're just destroyed if they're in the same hex. It's just, it doesn't make sense. And it's cumbersome. Cumbersome in ugly sort of ways that prevent, just like the boats. I can't have 3 ships in a sea area and move through it, as far as I can tell, unless I'm of a different alliance, right? Because my ships, they'll collide with each other? I don't know. It's just, there's these attempts to make the game playable, I guess, in some sort of way, but they don't make sense. They don't make sense. I feel like you should be able to have multiple squadrons in a single area, and then they'd each be able to maybe do an interception chance. To go look up the Navy's rule, because maybe that's in there. And I ran across something else that I forgot about completely. Armies, even in an army group, check attrition separately. This is a big deal, because I've been doing the attrition over on the 17 plus table for these big multi-army stacks, which doesn't do anywhere near the damage that they should be taking when they're out of supply. 3 fleets of the same side can stack together in a sea area blockade box at Wara Harbor. That's all it says. You could read that as they can be in multiple stacks in the same space, maybe. I don't know. That doesn't really fit with what the land stacking is. In a single hex, there can only be 1 force, but they specify it very clearly there. They don't specify this. But if they did want to do that, I would say harbors and blockade boxes aren't the same kind of thing as a big chunk of the Mediterranean here, or the Bay of Biscay, where you could definitely have multiple fleets operating in the same area without them being able to support one another. Well, sorry, multiple squadrons. But, God. I mean, every time I start thinking about this game, every time I run into stuff, I just start realizing how bad it is. How fucking bad the basic concepts of this game are. Which is, I've known one person who thought this was a very good game. I run into things like Banania's comments, which are like, I really love this game, but the rules are a fucking mess. That's why I rewrote, I tried to incorporate everything in them. But then I'm like, why did you really love this game? Why would anybody really love this game? It's a step back from War and Peace. It really is. It's like, one of my viewers commented, this is somewhere in between Napoleonic Wars and like Empires in Arms. Yeah, I don't feel like that. I feel like this is on the same level as Empires in Arms in a lot of ways. It's in the same game space. It's in the same game space as War and Peace is, more specifically. And because the hexes allow for some complexity of movement and whatnot and positioning, I would say in a lot of ways it's actually a heavier game than Empires in Arms. But not much heavier. And I would say War and Peace is probably not much. Like, the thing is, you just have this operational movement instead of the area-based movement. And yeah, I mean, in terms of overall weight of the game, in terms of the rules and everything, I feel like this is trying to do something very much like Empires and Arms is, which I don't feel War and Peace was trying to do ever. Of course, it was from an earlier era, but it got revamped multiple times and doesn't seem to have really changed much somehow. Certainly not in the ways that I wanted it to, like having a viable campaign game. In other than 2 players. Again, like this game, War and Peace's 2-player game may actually kind of work. It's the multiplayer, which was the point to me, right? But yeah, I do not understand why anybody would favor this thing. It has some little glimmers of niceness about it, but then, man, it just gets so much wrong. And, you know, even in the core stuff, like the movement and combat and everything, it's clunkier and different in ways that don't really help it. Like I said, unlike War and Peace, this one seems to, like, get you into a position where maneuvering doesn't matter all that much, to tell you the truth. All of that is due to the simple fact that the attrition rules are garbage in this game. The 3-army thing, forget about that. Like, that's just me making a mistake. But the idea that, like, a force does not take any attrition at all if it's in supply, pretty much. As long as it doesn't try to force march or extend movement. And the idea that extended movement, which feels more like a strategic movement or a road movement type thing where you're not in contact with the enemy, actually costs you an attrition check, but like moving carefully near the enemy where the enemy can be raiding and, you know, inflicting problems on you, on your supply sources and whatnot, doesn't actually do anything. Like, that just feels weird. Again, just, I don't know. I'm on a chit. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm trying to move my French, and God knows this is going to be a big one for this time of the war. And I already want to leave. I haven't moved a piece, and I want to leave. These control markers. I've already talked about, you know, how control of areas feels like that works pretty well. You can just put little area control markers. In EU, you have control of areas and control of fortresses, but they're indicated by different counters. Here you got to use the same counters for both, right? But also, just pawing through these to find the counters you need is just a fucking pain in the ass. I don't know what I would suggest. Maybe, see, some of me says, oh, well, put all of, like, you know, all of one side, have something else on the other. So maybe it would be something along the lines of every nation has a pool of control. I don't know. I mean, it's usually easy to find French ones, which is what I had to dig through for this. But finding like a Turkish or a British one, and then there's ones that don't seem to serve any purpose, like the Swedes and the Italians that have their own control markers. And it's like, why? They aren't allowed to operate on their own. I guess you could use them as the nation that controls them, if you can kind of remember that. Managed to move a piece. Suchet did take Posen, and I'm going to stop there because I don't want to get close to the Prussians with that. But what that means is that this is now in supply. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4. No, 5. Oh, 5. Fuck. That's not going to work. Son of a bitch. Okay. 5 to here. Does he have a wagon with him? Could he have pulled one? He could have pulled one with him out of this. I guess. I don't know. Does that cost me an integration where I had to spend 2 movement? I don't care. I really don't care. And that gets me supplies coming this way. And that gets me close enough that I can remove this. This is like, the supply networks in War and Peace are so much easier because I think you have to have troops for every supply. So you've got like these garrison units all over the map, spreading out all over the place. In Empires in Arms, it's easier because you have depots, and they don't give you a lot of range, if I recall correctly. I don't remember. Maybe they're greater than I thought. I don't recall specifically, but because it's area-based, I had the feeling that, like, you kind of have to have a depot, and in order to make an attack into Russia, you need this huge chain of depots that you can't make it there otherwise. Whereas the supply situation, without using all your depots, basically, and so your supply line becomes very weak, maybe too weak. In this game, though, if you've conquered a bunch of fortresses, you just have access through all of those, as long as you recovered them. And if you, let me count my Spaniards. I may have given my troop back. Yeah, I did, which means I owe a couple of bucks here. I didn't want to I thought about using the troop just to make space for those other troops to come forward, but I don't want to use the manpower because if my army takes a defeat somewhere, I'm going to need the manpower next turn, right? So, like, those detachments can fill up, the armies if they get slammed. So, always use your money first, I guess, except sometimes it might be hard. Like, there might be places where you're like, well, this detachment's not going to do me a lot of good, and I want to do that first, but I've got a few bucks left. But, Jesus, God, I hate this game. Well, the Prussians evaded the French attack. The French don't particularly need to destroy the Prussian army, although they could keep trying. I only have 1 movement point left, but I could probably, let's try that again. I was going to say, I was done with that. It's an Empire Land 2. I don't have any 2s I want to move. I can't move my detachments on that. I already got that? Nope. I kind of wish these weren't colored because they confuse things. Like, I wish there were colors different for the 2 land things because they're really important. Black on white doesn't help because everything else is black on white, but red on white doesn't really help because it confuses. So, like, the fact that there's a naval one here and a naval here, these get blurred in, but of course the neutral land gets blurred in with that, and it's just fucking, again, more annoyances, but that's expected. Compass never gets the graphics right and expresses everything properly. It's certainly a lesser problem than the dark blue entry dates, which are hopeless. But yeah, I think I want to pursue into there. But the point is, I might, it's to my best advantage to hold off on making any decisions wherever I can. So, like, Davout here, I don't necessarily want to move him got that threat from Spain. I don't know what I want to do about it. Like, do I expect Spain to come in and hit me? Do I want them to? Maybe. Maybe I do. I don't know. On the other hand, I would really like to knock Russia out, but that's not going to happen before Austria can join the war. So that's kind of problematic. Yab. And yeah. But I do think I want to try to pursue those Prussians. That's my final step. And if the Prussians, do a forced march or something to try to take Warsaw back, I smack them here. Königsberg is outside their reach, although maybe not outside the Russian reach. They can't get there without a forced march. And Berlin, although not heavily defended, is again outside the Prussian reach. So I think we finally beat Prussia. And I think I'm done. Because we got Dawn showing up, I really should go to sleep. Or maybe not, I don't know. It's hard to tell. It's like tomorrow's dance night. I kind of want to maybe do some yard work today. I kind of prepared for that. Although my back fucking hurts. Usually my back ends up better when I... This camera has a problem. I can tell you what it is in a moment. But usually pulling the cart makes my back feel better. But it didn't today. It didn't make it any worse, I don't think. Hauling my milk crates to get them because I am afraid to go down the hill that broke my cart last time. But it did not help my back particularly. My back has been kind of problematic since I broke my cart. My back, my knee, my ankle, just everything fucking went. My hip, all at once. But yeah, so what's wrong with this camera? The red ones have a little marker on them that tells me how much battery I have left. This doesn't give me that until I hit a lower battery. Like, I don't know when it clicks on, but it's not as constant a thing. But the vid screen gives me a little, what the fuck's that? It's like a little dude there. Touching the little dude doesn't do anything. I don't know what the fuck it is. This one has more complicated information on it. I think this one's actually more a newer one than this one, but I think I got it earlier. Whatever. And now I got another copy of the red one, which they made me very happy, but this one may be more sturdy because the view screen hasn't gone out, or maybe it did. I don't know. Maybe what went wrong was that I fucked up and ended up running off of not the memory card and off the camera's main memory, which is not very big, and that may be why I bought another one. I don't know what the story is anymore. Like, it's too long ago. But this was a reserve one, and now it's working pretty damn well. Other than the couple of little things, and it has a more complex setup on it. But on the other hand, this damn thing, the screen going out on it was hell, but the screen may have gone out on this one as well. So I don't fucking know. And I'm just babbling because I don't want to play. I want to talk. A couple hours into Friday, I don't know why. I did a little bit of yard work. My back hurt too much, so I weed whacked stuff down below the hill. And I did laundry, but I haven't been coming up and playing. And yes, I don't like the game and blah, blah, blah. I feel like there's more, and also I found an addiction, to eat up my time in terms of another little game for probably a few days or something. But I almost feel like it's the chits that have come out that I haven't gotten hit with the big chit yet, and I'm kind of trying to avoid that. So I haven't been coming up, in between. Haven't been watching videos either. So, that's one of the other things is like I'd watch a video and I'd come up and play a turn, then I'd go down and watch a video. That's about the best I can do. Anyway, let's do another chit. Let's just draw it. Also knowing that it's summer and that like winter quarters isn't going to come up. All right. Probably not too huge. We'll see. I pulled a couple more chits, the Coalition one and Empire Land 4. In both cases, there's more opportunities to move things. They're not eating up all their low-numbered chits. So screw it. Delay. But of course, I also am like, yeah, but also screw me, like being up here. I just don't want to. As though, the fact that I know I'm going to have to move a lot of pieces is just really weighing on me. And I don't want to do it. I don't want to fucking do it. When I haven't felt this disinclination to this degree, I think, previously. Maybe it's the false, hints, hopes that the game would end early due to a couple of situations where, especially where the Turks were close to winning. I don't know. I just don't know. It was 1 or so in the morning on Sunday, and I forced myself to pick another chit. Dancing kind of wipes me out, and well, we can definitely do that one. Just pushing myself to do the game has gotten harder and harder, but the dance wiped me out. And I had thoughts of coming up here a couple of times earlier in the day, and now kind of just said, screw it, I got to do at least one. I had another one that I didn't have anything I want to do with, the Coalition land, and then an Empire Land 1, which could be the big one, but I want to delay a little bit longer. I don't know why. There's just sort of this, I'm not going to force march. I know that I've got an Empire Land 3, so I just moved a couple of detachments, and that's really it. I got to think about my Turks, though. They might not have moved stuff they want to move. Trips of the summer. Oh, I couldn't really figure out anything I want to do with the Coalition. I'm not willing to pull the Brits down yet. Marching here doesn't make a lot of sense. Using naval operations makes more sense. It's really tough to come up with any plans that really work. Now, I ended up getting the Empire Land phase, which I did move some forces forward into Poland, and I'm leaving a lot of forces here in kind of a middle-of-the-road position, because if Spain attacks, I'm in trouble. I have to be able to get forces into place that can defend Paris. Actually, I really should have an army down there to face the Spanish army, but I feel I might be able to delay them enough and march an army back into place if things get ugly. Meanwhile, I'm kind of hoping to be able to smash Russia fast. However, that puts us at the end of the chits and into, there isn't going to be any attrition, but into the surrender, and we have Prussia surrendering at this point. And then next turn, in the autumn, we have Austria open to join the war. Spain might join the war. Britain has sent out little notes to people by this point to try to coordinate this. Even if Prussia isn't joining, there's the request that these other countries do. Do they want to, is the question. a big question. Looking over the conditions, we're going to take 3 provinces, the maximum we're allowed to take, and we're going to impose the continental system. Even though, see, we rolled the mandatory peace, and it only goes until 1812, summer of 1812. We got a 7-turn, so they'll be able to come back in summer of 1812. And that kind of makes it iffy whether we want to take the continental system. It might be better to take income from Prussia, but I think indemnities is 2 peace conditions, which doesn't work. We only have 1 to spare. We do want those provinces. Mandatory alliances 2. Extending the peace would be 1, but if we did that, we'd want the continental system. So I'm not finding that spare condition. Yeah, I could take military aid. That might not be too terrible. I am a little short trying to fill 4 armies. Yeah, I have reserves back there, but I could fill those 4 armies given that I'm allowing detachments to be in. But I'm going to go with the continental system simply because if I can keep that rolling, we might end up in a powerful position. Plus, it denies money to both Prussia and Britain, which is kind of nice. What 3 provinces, though? One option is to take the Poles. I could take Masovia, Posen, and East Galicia. They're not going to start with any troops. It's kind of a blurry situation, right? But if we look at Poland here, yeah, they have troops when they're set up. But it doesn't really make sense to me that they just have an army at this point. Which means that I can interpret that as the 1792 setup. But, having just formed them, it shouldn't be their setup. Another alternative is, the Confederation of the Rhine I cannot create because I do not have Thuringia. I could create Westphalia, I think. I have Hanover right now. I would have to take Magdeburg, Brunswick, and Hesse. Which one is a better choice is the real question. Poland has more troops and is more valuable in general. Westphalia, some of the stuff that I'm getting in there is giving me money. Unfortunately, Hanover is considered as part of, I think it's considered as one of the things that I have to have for my victory as part of my empire. No, it's not. I see writing there, which generally means it's part of that German Empire stuff. But it just says French 1805, which is weird. It's like, why? I don't know. Anyway, I mean, they started with them, so it's kind of an indicator of information that's on here, but I'm not sure what it serves. So I could give up Hanover. And the thing is, that would give me a force that's closer to sort of my heartland and be more helpful. So I've got to consider whether I want Westphalia or Poland out of this. And really it's one or the other. Westphalia is kind of crap. It comes with 1 corps. What is it made up of again? Magdeburg, Hanover, Brunswick, and Hesse. So I would be giving up essentially 2 minors, Hanover and Hesse, to create something, and I get nothing out of it. So there's kind of a, why would I want to do this? Hanover, if I created them, since I already have absorbed Holland, if Hanover got created, it would be created as a satellite. Hesse, since I already own Palatinate, no, Berg is in the way there. Who owns Berg right now? Oh. Is Berg part of Berg? Berg is part of something. Berg is part of Bavaria at this point. So I would, well, no. Yeah, so if I create Hesse before I give Hanover up, I could create it as a satellite state, and it would be as strong as Westphalia, which comprises all of them. And it's really kind of like, why would I fucking want to create Westphalia? It's stupid. I see no bonus. It doesn't come with a leader or anything. It's not particularly exciting troops. They're about the same. I mean, they're the same value as what else is out there, right? Who else? Oh, the Hessians. Yeah, the Hessians are 013. Yeah, I don't see any point to that. So I guess I'm going to create Poland because it actually comes with some reasonable forces. And again, there's reasons you want to create I don't know if there's Westphalia in Empires in Arms. I think it's included in the Rhine Confederation. There's a reason you want to create it. You get a political advantage out of it. I don't see any mechanism in this game that gives me any reason that I'd want to create Westphalia. Confederation of the Rhine, yes, because it gives me a core for stuff that doesn't come with any troops. So maybe, of course, maybe I just want to absorb those territories. But one of them, Berg, that's the one I keep looking up here, is not something that I can just strip from Bavaria without some reason. So, yeah. Is there any great reason to create the Kingdom of Bavaria? Well, I think that's how you loose Berg. I don't even think I can create the Confederation of the Rhine until I've created the Kingdom of Bavaria. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? But yeah, so I'm gonna grab the Polish territories and create Poland, and so be it. False dawn happening right now. So yeah, we're sitting here at the beginning of the autumn turn, and I've got some stuff to redeploy. But I guess the big question is what happens in the diplomacy stage, which is, look, Prussia just surrendered, they're out. But Austria and Spain have both been given messages, right? And I don't know if either one is going to jump in. I think if Prussia was in the war, it would be almost automatic. But the big issue here is Austria has a couple of units left to build. Not sure why they don't have them built. Guess the time hasn't come by yet. They have a shit ton of money. Enough that they could buy another army, but they don't have the troops for another army, even flooding detachments in and whatnot. It wouldn't be very effective. And then Spain has quite a bit left to build, but they're in this position where they could just attack. I guess what we do is we go through the order, and Spain will be the first option. If they get an odd, I'm gonna throw them into the war. And what does this do in terms of reinforcement? So this is kind of the tricky thing. The reinforcement and replacement phase happens before the diplomacy, which I've always felt is kind of fucked up. Because you don't have an opportunity to sort of react to the diplomacy that's going to happen. But on the other hand, I can see the argument, especially when it comes to deploying actual troops, not just shifting leaders around. When it comes to what we're looking at right now is really just, hey, where would we put leaders and whatever? And honestly, I don't feel like I need to switch that and go analyzing, the command structure on all the forces, unless something is going to change. Now, I've often been wrong about that, where, I do want to screw around with the command structure, but I have real trouble getting to it. But anyway, let's take a look. Let's see if Spain goes in. Well, who knows? I think Spain's going to hold off. And then when we get to Austria, yeah, I feel like it's almost impossible for them to make the decision to come in. How much damage can Russia do to the French? If the Austrians throw in with them, fine, but even so. So I think Austria also is going to hold off, which means Russia is in a shit ton of trouble. Russia does have the capability to just pull out of this stuff and make it somebody else's problem to solve the Turkish issue. Now, with no one at war with Turkey, we can't really do that, but I don't know. Oh, yeah, and it is still a problem. Turkey could still automatically win the game, because I don't think the Ottoman Empire has been disassembled until after the winter conquests of Algeria and Morocco. Day on Sunday, it's kind of interesting. The first chit drawn is Coalition Land 2. Now, this is not a summer turn, so there's usually some desire to move some of your pieces. But there's a lot of neutrals in the game, first of all. Austria, Prussia, Spain are all out of war right now. So the coalition is not very large. It's Russia and England. And there was nothing I wanted to move, because the main Russian armies over here want to react to the French, and the English want to utilize their naval power. So it actually was a pretty quiet turn. Ideally, we would have seen a huge coalition form, where Prussia tried to keep itself alive, Austria and Spain all entered into the war. The lack of diplomacy that the game has made that harder to accomplish, and that's why I did die rolls that made that a difficult thing to come to. I kind of screwed something up. Got the coalition naval phase. The English, now this wouldn't affect last turn because they invaded last turn, I think. I'm not sure. But they should have an out of supply marker down here in Algiers. They can't draw supply from Algiers. They don't have a depot there. They don't have the cash to buy a depot. even if they had one available. The Brits don't have a lot of depots in the game. I think they only have two. One here and one up in Copenhagen, I think. Unless I have one kicking around an army. Ah, the Anglo-Dutch army has one. Okay. But that may be the one from Copenhagen. It's not. So I don't need one in Copenhagen. That's now a British ally. So I can shift that depot down there, but I'm gonna have to kind of work to do that because I've got the dance of like ships that need to get out of the way, essentially. To open it up, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So what I'm going to have to do is actually ship a depot down here to Bristol and then ship the Bristol depot down. And this is going to cause possibly a reordering of my fleets, which maybe opens up an opportunity for the Empire to break its way out navally, for what it's worth. I can't move the same depot multiple times by ship off one naval counter, but since I had a depot here, I could replace that depot and bring another fleet over. But I wasn't able to get much. I was only able to get down to Portsmouth. With the channel open, Portsmouth's not an unreasonable place for me to sail ships, but there's just this craziness. If I want to transport goods or move fleets or whatever, anything I want to do, I've got to do some really crazy shit to keep stuff working. It may make the most sense for me to move the, whatever this is, Peninsular Army, out of here. It's very small, and just leave Algiers as conquered, but out of supply, essentially. It'll supply itself. I could even leave a step there if that's easier. One step would be in supply. I don't know if there's much value to that. It would reduce my shipping costs for the Peninsular Army so I could build it up. But I think I have to flee back to Gibraltar where I'll be in supply. So I'm kind of... I could go someplace else. I could go to Malta. Malta is actually a minor power, I think. I don't know. Doesn't matter. It's either minor or it's British property. So either way, it'll be a supply source. Or Sardinia or something like that, which would keep me a little closer. I don't know if it really makes much difference. The Turks are bottled up, so I'm not too worried about them getting out, although they may wish to. I don't know. But I'm spending enough time on this that I'm just going to do the naval shit, and that's it. So the naval stacking rules and everything is making me do really odd things. You know, I can't move my ships where I want to, and all kind of shit like that. It's just... It's, again, one of the places where one of the core systems in the game isn't working as written, and where other games just handle it so much better in a cleaner, simpler fashion. I built an Empire 2 counter at this point, and that set me on the thought, which is, look, it's the French and Turkish turn. What do I need to capture? Well, from the French point of view, Moscow and St. Petersburg is their most likely, although they could do Moscow, Kiev, and Odessa. Those are the surrender conditions for Russia. But here's the interesting thing. Turkey and France are not part of the same bloc. They operate in the same coalition shit. I'm not sure they even have to, but I'm trying to rationalize and make sure that opposing powers aren't operating on the same shit, because I believe that's the intention, even if there's no rule against it in the multiplayer rules. But what's not covered at all is kind of what happens if Russia is being defeated by both France and Turkey, who are of a different bloc, right? Let's say the French take Moscow. Who the fuck is it? It's really not there. There we go. Okay. Let's say the French take Moscow. And I don't know, maybe Kiev, but maybe the Turks take Kiev and Odessa, ignoring the automatic victory situation that Turkey would be in if they get it during this year. What the hell happens? It's not clear. So it looks like by the wording of here, if all Criterion cities of a major power are occupied by supplied enemy combat units, or if the corresponding fortresses have been reactivated by the enemy, makes it sound like it's a singular, the power must sue for peace. In all cases, the enemy must control the capital city plus one of the combination of Criterion cities. Of course, they repeat the capital in all of these, but okay. But it's interesting because here it's by supplied enemy combat units, which implies perhaps all enemies, but elsewhere it appears to be singular. It would make sense that a country that is under pressure from two enemies that aren't necessarily allied might have to surrender due to, the bad situation that they're in. But I don't know what it all means, right? There's no clarification in the multiplayer rules about this. And it is a real problematic, at least I don't think there are. Yeah. I don't see anything that handles surrender cases. So, lots of questions come up. If I surrender to both, do they split the victory conditions like they would if they were in a block? Can I surrender to only one? Do I have to surrender at all if not a singular enemy has me on the ropes? All of these are kind of up in the air. Using some reason, I think what you can do is that you can choose to surrender to one power. Presumably, you pick one that would get you out of the automatic peace, and that power gets full victory conditions. If you surrender to both, I feel you have to give them both full victory conditions, because presumably either one could have defeated you, which means you probably aren't going to surrender to both. That's just me using some logic here and trying to come up with what the rules should have said. But again, I'm making shit up as I go. All right, anyway, I think the French do want to move with a fair number of their forces here. I'm still in this horrible position where, the forces here, I kind of want to keep in reserve, although I don't think Spain will attack me, nor Austria, going into the winter. I think that's unlikely. They would have attacked this turn if they were going to. Although Britain probably sent out more notes saying, come on, guys! A couple of armies forward. The main force moving forward from Poland Not sure what I'm going to do with that. But this one grabbed Kovno using supplies from Königsberg, which I think I'm all good in supplies, coming out of Warsaw at the very least. And that allows me to to position a main army somewhere where it threatens the large Russian army. This is 3 armies. The Russians have 2. The Turks are afraid to do anything because this army is still closer to their forces and they don't have an army or anything to face, much less the 2-army block. So making the advance to try to take Kiev, which might automatically win them the game still, is too dangerous. And meanwhile, I'm keeping everything else of the French in reserve in order to react to a number of things. One is Wellington's still up here. Another is the possibility of Spain or Austria intervening, that I don't want to trigger my movement. I don't really need a second army here to go take St. Petersburg. Although there is some threat of smaller forces, I could break off a second army from Napoleon's group. It's just gosh, I don't want to commit to anything, which has been kind of the problem all along. Anyway, that's enough for now. A few useless chits being drawn, ones that nobody did anything with, basically. We moved Victor. A Winter Quarters, an Empire naval chit, in which the French made a couple of attempts to break out that did not go well. Although their odds were about even, and I think it won a +1. On their 2 attempts, they lost a ship in each, which is bad, or a fleet in each, which is bad. Russians unwilling to essentially pass did a pullback over here, but they also captured Odessa, making the Turkish threat a little bit less real. I'm not convinced I want to move the Kiev force yet. It's holding the Turks at bay. And it is still, sort of partway between the Turkish and French threats. I will need to defend against the French with that army, or dual army. Maybe, I don't know. I do have a problem though. This force has, now I got a coalition land 3, which is no good. I need the 1 at this point to move. This force is fully stocked, and I'll want to rebuild guards at least come spring, but I don't really have that opportunity right now. The French committed a little bit more. I sent some reinforcements to the east, but I'm sending the Spanish army back home. I don't know. These things aren't going to really help that much, but I may end up switching Suchet in for another leader because I only have 12 strength points in a couple of these armies. And yeah, it's just really hard to make a decision as to what I can or might want to do at this point. Second Winter Quarters comes up. There's no attrition, no surrenders, nothing of any real interest. So we're pushing into the winter turn. And this is a good point for me to break. As I enter 1811 winter, I'm looking at the Boulogne camp. A one-shot. An army commanded by Napoleon may be activated during a French round without an activation marker. Okay, so then I'd get another. May move twice its movement factor and may engage in battle without an attrition check. That's weirdly stated. The last line especially. Does that just mean I have no attrition? I think so. I think I can move twice my movement factor, take no attrition, because, I mean, being able to move further, the idea of extended movement. So this is sort of like a forced march with extended movement that's greater than normal extended movement, right? Because I can move twice the movement factor, not 150%. Without the limitations, etc. None of it makes sense if I have to make some sort of attrition check based on it. I would get an activation marker or something else. The question is it worth it, right? Like, am I able to gain something? Moscow's a long way away. So I don't think I'm going to be able to knock the Russians out this turn. And at the same time, I have to take St. Petersburg, which is not necessarily difficult, but it's, again, a ways away. So I'm holding off. But I'm very worried about the entry of, again, Spain and Austria. And Prussia is not that far away, to be honest, right? They could join in too. So this concept of being able to knock the Russians out doesn't look like it's going to be easy. I thought, yeah, I'd be able to just storm in there with the Boulogne camp. But, I don't really think it's going to be anywhere near that easy. Now here, if I don't put a pontoon bridge down, this could go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll need a depot to get me there, or I can work out of Kovno, but again, Kovno doesn't get me to Minsk. I've got a long and hard journey to get to Moscow that's going to take a decent number of depots. And I'm going to have to, be kind of careful about how I set them up and use them. And what my supply route to get me Moscow and St. Petersburg is going to be like. It looks like I can get to here, 1, 2, 3, 4, I can get to there. Okay, so I can get to St. Pete without any additional depots. With a pontoon bridge, I can get Vilna then Minsk. That can get me to here to Smolensk, and then I only really need one depot to get me to Moscow. So that looks plausible, but again, I have to, drop one of my engineers off as a permanent crossing. Anyway, be that as it may, I don't see anything exciting happening until I build up the chit pool. Naval chits were thrown in, and one of the coalition naval chits came up to open things up with a successful invasion and conquest of Tunisia. And then we moved the supply depot down there. We actually have another naval move. We could push into something else with that next naval move, presumably, but instead I moved the Navy over to Portugal. I don't know if that was wise or not. The idea of... So I'm not going to be able to conquer Egypt. That's the big problem. And the idea of taking something else doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. But grabbing the chunk of North Africa up here is definitely valuable to me. And there's little reason for Turkey to try to come to peace with England over that. They would also have to go to peace with Russia, or England and Russia would part ways in their bloc, which doesn't really do me much good. Anyway, that took more effort than I wanted to deal with. And I don't know, like I was feeling the game a little bit more a while back, but I'm just not feeling it right now. So, yeah, I don't know. Okay, so we got another Empire. We got actually 2 Empire naval activities come up, neither of which were used. I pulled the naval 2s out so that they don't just get thrown back in accidentally. And then I got the Empire Land 1. Now, I don't think I have any detachments that are on their own. And I don't have anything that I feel, well, actually I do have detachments that are on their own up here. I'll move a few of those Turks forward. But for the main part, I moved the 3 armies, 3 or 4, 4th army is up here, ended up taking Riga and pushing beyond. But these others have been marching forward, setting up really a supply line that comes out of Königsberg, actually. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Oh, I don't think I got this. 1, 2, 3, 4. That doesn't make it there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Huh. I kind of screwed up then. I'm trying to figure out where my supply line here goes. So I need this to get to here. I'm going to have to drop a detachment or something off. That'll do. Not sure it's enough. See, I can run a detachment. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I can run a detachment here and another detachment. These guys were, I think, here. Another detachment, let's see. Keep another one there. This is actually probably a little safer, I don't know. It's hard to tell. Because, yeah, I misread this. There is definitely a river there that is getting in my way. So I'm using detachments instead of supply sources, depots. I'm not sure why. At some point or another, I could just use a depot. But right now, the detachments aren't really doing me much harm there. And I'm, again, holding off with these. Not so much... See, the thing is, I'm worried about winter. The end of turn in winter is very easy to happen. The winter quarters in winter as opposed to the winter quarters in other seasons. So I want to make sure I get what I need to get done here done. But again, I don't really want to commit myself to moving any of this stuff because I don't know what's happening next turn at all. There are arguments for moving Suchet's force away. That might be worth it. Hanover is... See, I gotta see what it is. Hanover is French territory. So if I can get Suchet into French territory, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that actually will allow me to build up the army of Spain more quickly for an anti-Austrian threat, or an Austrian threat, yet still be a little closer against the Spaniards. I gotta move a few of those, and then that's it. I'm so upset with myself because I'm just fucking around all day and not playing much of this, but I'm also not getting anything else done. It's, Sunday night now. And I've been up a good deal of time, but I've just been screwing around with my time. And then I think to myself, yeah, you know, I could go out. There are things I need to do outside the house, but it's so much easier to just neglect everything. At the end of year, the winter quarters here, kind of a weird situation. Coalition got a naval move. Okay, they shifted some of their ships around. Nothing too exciting there. Then they got their land move, and I chose not to do anything with it. Largely because this Russian double army here, it couldn't be in a fortress in time to build another force. Now, I don't know if that really matters, because if I'm going to build up the Russian forces, I think I need to build the third army for them, which would be over here, because I think these armies are full up. There was one thing I wanted to do. I wanted to get that Cossack out of there. That I definitely needed to do. And that can just drift around. I don't care where. Okay. But yeah, we hit winter quarters. We're going to see the surrender of I guess Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia are all going to fall at this point. Now, the Brits have small armies, and it's probably worth it for them to create minor states. It's kind of a weird situation. It's like you will never take British territory away from them easily. Like, it's almost impossible for anyone to make Britain surrender. France, I guess, could do it if, you know, if they win the naval war or get some kind of lucky break that lets them win it temporarily and get control of the channel. And they might actually have control of the channel. I mean, it's open right now, so they could slip across. I've got nothing garrisoning the channel, but it kind of doesn't matter because Britain won't surrender. So, because I could get ships into the channel at any point. There is the possibility of timing causing some capability there. But yeah, I just couldn't justify moving the Russians again, even though, as you can see, it looks white there. Okay. Alrighty, we had a problem. Video cut off because of lack of memory, and just pulling the rest of these off. Let me get back because now my battery's dying. What I was going into was that the Russians didn't really want to move their force forward. I went into a little bit more detail. I had to pull this Cossack out of their force. And the main reason for that was maybe some delay, but for the most part, just maintaining a flexibility so that I could strike in either direction. Some of it's kind of weird because I think I'm going to have to build a third Russian army to be able to compete. And then I think, I don't know where I got cut off exactly, but North Africa is going to all surrender to the British. And I think that's the only real effect in this winter phase. The question, of course, then becomes, hey, what happens, you know, during the spring phase? Well, full negotiations are available in a spring, in the spring interphase of a spring turn, as opposed to the spring interphases of every other turn. So there is some possibility that we could see Austria and Spain coming in, or maybe they'll delay another turn, try to let the French push even further, because the French are kind of holding out in a sort of mid position statement. Now, one thing I did, I don't know if I caught this, I moved the army of Spain under Sichuan over into Hanover because that, I think I already discussed that. That's going to allow me to reinforce it more easily. And I guess that's really about it. All right, I will add this to the end of that last video and load it up. And then we'll come for the, hey, it's 1812, and are we going to do it with real cannons? Yeah, obviously. No. Okay.